Hello, and welcome to the Arts Ed Newark podcast, Healing Centered Arts Education. This is a four-part podcast series produced by Arts Ed Newark that explores how healing-centered, arts-based practices are transforming classrooms, schools, and community spaces across Newark at a time when young people need them most. I'm your host, Lauren Mann, Executive Director of Arts Ed Newark, and today we are having a conversation about the role of arts education in supporting young people, schools, and communities. In this series, we are exploring how creativity, healing-centered engagement, and arts learning can shape the experiences of students and educators, particularly in communities that are working to build more supportive and expressive school environments. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Al-Tariq, the Executive Director of the Hubb in Newark. The Hubb has become an important space in the city for youth development, creativity, and community connection. Through its work, the organization provides opportunities for young people to explore their interests, build skills, and engage in programs that support both personal growth and artistic expression. Al-Tariq brings a deep commitment to youth leadership and community empowerment. His work focuses on creating environments where young people feel seen, valued, and encouraged to develop their voices and talents. Al-Tariq, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having a platform like this. It means so much and it's so necessary.
Oh, thank you. Well, to start, I'd love to hear a bit about your own journey, to share with the audience what led you to this work and to your role leading the Hubb.
Yeah, well, 20 years ago is crazy. Wow. Every time I say that, it's like, wow. When I hear God laugh, tell him what you got planned, right? But my son put a charge on me to do more for my community 20 years ago by asking me a simple question. We had survived a traumatic incident that happened in the city of Newark. And in the midst of me really getting upset with my son, and not really upset with him, but upset and embarrassed at the situation that had happened, I was yelling at my son, telling him, don't ever let me catch you in these streets. You see what just happened, blah, blah, blah. And my son, 14 years old, stopped me in my rant and said, Dad, you always talk about being part of the solution, not part of the problem. Like, what are you doing about it? And he shook his head and everything. And I was just like, what? Oh my God. I felt like my son had just called me a hypocrite because the reality of it is I was a parent and he's seen something in his community that he shouldn't have seen, right? That he shouldn't experience and shouldn't be normal, and I was asking him not to play a part of it. But his role was saying to me, "What are you doing about it so that I don't have to go through it?" And I didn't have an answer. And me not having an answer to that simple question changed my life forever. Because at that moment, I vowed to never be in a position ever again where any of my children ask me, "What am I doing for my community?" and I not have an answer. So I took everything I knew from the music business, from growing up in Newark, from surviving the traumas that I've experienced in life, and I started a nonprofit. I really didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I wanted to be an answer to my son's question, and here we are, 20 years later, like still doing this work. I stopped running from it. I dedicated my life to being a change agent for our young people and a mentor for our youth, and really trying to show them what kept me alive, right? What kept me going. And arts was everything for me. I just knew that I was going to be the KRS One, LL Cool J, Tupac, all mixed in one in the music business, and that wasn't my calling, right? But God had a different plan for me, and utilized those talents and stuff to show me a different way to help our young people.
Absolutely. Can you share a bit about the Hubb and how your work really centers youth and creativity and community healing?
Right. So the hub is really based, in three sections: entertainment, education, and empowerment. The entertainment part is really the catch, right? So we really created art spaces, right? Studio, videography, photography, culinary arts. They get to do cosmetology, all of the things that kind of help them be in a great space of what they're doing, what they like and what they love, right? But then we break it down to them on, we have therapeutic art mentors that talk to them and help them through the process of doing what they want to do, but then asking the question, how are things, and then working on, peeling back the layers of what's going on in their world, right? So the education part with financial literacy, health and wellness, grooming, and self-efficacy. But I love the part about empowering them and going back to the peeling back the layers, because too many times, myself included, we suffer in silence, right? We don't realize that it's not okay to not be okay, that it's okay to not be okay, right? You just can't stay stuck there, right? So we kind of work with them in the magic of doing what they love by showing them that it's okay to talk about some of the things that's going on. So the hub is built in that way where there's always somebody that you can feel safe with to talk about, whether it be through the therapeutic art mentors, whether it be through the credible messengers, we call them the high risk interventionists, or whether it be one of the, social workers, we call a wellness counselor, right? That's working there. So everybody's a trusted adult, and we do my Thoughts Out Loud, which is the flagship program for over 19 years, where the young people get to check in. As soon as they come in, they check in on where they're at as a level of 1 to 10 where they're at. So of course, if you get 5 and below, we want to figure out like what's going on. High notes, of course, we considering that everything is okay, but we still check in. But it's like a temperature check for our young people. So the hub is really based on just making sure that the young people feel safe and that they have a space to be able to talk about what it is that's going on in their world and how we can help them. As soon as they walk through those doors, we're there to serve them. I know that was a long answer, but I just wanted to really break it down.
It was a great answer. What I was going to say next is that, in the rest of this podcast series, we're really focused more on folks inside school buildings.
Hmm.
And so when you and I, talk about healing centered engagement, right, we're talking about something a little different. What does that look like in practice in community spaces outside of school buildings, right? Which is really kind of the sweet spot with the hub.
Well, again, giving them a space where we're not talking at them but listening to them, right? And utilizing it in a art form, right? Just really creating a space for them to feel comfortable in whatever it is, like non-judgment, not really judging them for anything, because what I learned in my time doing this work and even growing up, which I didn't realize at that time, was that we all have different ways of healing. It's a different process for everybody. It's an individual journey, and just creating a space for them to understand that they have that right to not be okay, right? But again, pushing the narrative that you just can't stay stuck there, right? So what are we willing to do about it? But you have control, right? You can give it power or you can take the power away, right? And that's a choice that you have, right? And so many people don't understand that, right? And it took me a long time to really understand that and become at the level that something may have happened even if it didn't, right? So being able to be in that position where we can, notice there's a change. There's some behavior that happened that changed, and why? Why are they in that situation instead of judging them for being in that space? So, um, just really just trying to be cautious on how we talk with our young people, um, not re-traumatize them, right? Just being in a space of awareness, situational awareness, where we really, the emotional intelligence steps in and really understands that something may have happened. So I think I went a little bit too much, but the reality of it is like all of those things come to play because you never know when you have an opportunity to really help a young person, or when that young person is really reaching out versus just being their regular self.
Absolutely. What have you seen, like maybe some examples of what you've seen change in young people when they're given creative spaces that really honor their lived experiences and their cultural identities?
Oh my God. I mean, I won't say names, but I've watched a few young people like create songs, right? That that really speak to their parents that's not in their life anymore, right? But like a letter to them, right? Through music, right? Or poetry, or even when they doing the culinary part and cooking and talking about the relationship that they had with somebody that they lost, and being able to finally be able to talk about it just because they're comfortable and in a safe space. So watching that change, and then honoring the fact that they were able to understand that they're making the decision to be better as well, because most of the young people that we entertain are the ones that, for the lack of better terms, the high schools and MPD throw away, right? Discard. And, we just love on them, and give them that space to be themselves, right? Not judging them for whatever mistake they've made, right? And watching them, they laugh when I say this, but I hope you guys understand it. When the light comes on, boop, right? When they start to realize that I can instead of I can't, is magical for us, right? Like it's like, oh my God. So we know, like, now, because they understand it in full term, they can be able to help somebody else.
100%. And so you've touched on this a little bit, but how have arts-based practices helped build the trust and the relationships you were talking about with youth, who may be obviously navigating a lot of trauma or instability at home?
Well, again, really just, I I can't say it enough, just creating that space where they're able to talk about stuff that they won't talk about with nobody else, right? And that safe space allows them to do that. And most of the time, the safe space comes from when it's doing something that they love, which most of the time is the arts, right? Whether it be the studio, whether it be the graphic design, whether it be the photography, whether it be cosmetology, the culinary arts. We find a way that makes them feel comfortable doing what they love, and then we create that space even more for them to talk about, asking the right questions so that they can talk about what's really going on in their world without pressuring them.
I think there's also quite literally a unique space you've created with like the physical place that is the hub. But I think as a community-based organization, right, there's a role you play in complementing what schools are trying to do around
Mhm.
student wellness.
Yes.
What role do you think you play in complementing that piece with the schools?
Um, well, what I want to do better at is this trifecta between the parents and the schools, right, and the community, right? Just making them understand that we all play a role in this, right? Our young people are going to be young people, right? They're going to manipulate, they're going to do all the things that they can, right? But if we create a bridge for them to understand that they can't play on either one of us, that we are here to serve them, then it becomes easier for them to understand that they can just be truthful, right? Instead of hiding and suffering and feeling like they can't talk about what it is. So I think that we've done a good job, but I think we could do a better job because, again, especially when it comes to the parents and sometimes teachers, because I don't want to get them off the hook, but I believe that we get so used to what we think is the right thing instead of understanding that it's a different world today for these young people and what they're dealing with, what they're experiencing, their, the situations with, again, the violence, right, that happens in our cities, right? It's not normal and it shouldn't be normalized, right? So we have to be innovative in how we create spaces for them to feel that way. And that has to happen in our schools and that has to happen at home. But too many times we don't, we normalize it ourselves that we don't even understand that we have to create that space for them. I hope that answered that.
Yeah, I think it's really important that interconnectedness, like we talk all the time at Arts at Newark about how it's an ecosystem,
Right,
right? And so thinking holistically about like a child doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? They go to
right,
school, they have a home somewhere with someone,
right,
and if they're lucky enough, a space like yours where they have these caring adults around them. And so yeah, I think that awareness is really important.
right. And trusted adults too. Like caring, yes, but trusting because I can see that you care about me, but do I trust you enough to open up? Is so important, you know. So yes.
Absolutely. And from your perspective, we've talked about and you've shared how the arts really are kind of the centerpiece. They're that hook. They're the place that you start to begin those trust and relationships.
Mhm.
So, what is lost for you when art programs are underfunded or start to disappear from neighborhoods?
Well, everything. The imagination of a young person. It starts with what they can visualize. If I can't see myself doing it, arts allow you to be able to do, to imagine, to be able to visualize. Like those things matter. And when you take that away and put them in a position where you just really, bang, bang, bang at them, and it doesn't work. We work from our creative space, and I fight for that. I advocate for that, the arts, all the time for our young people, because I know it saved my life. Music really saved my life, and it really afforded me to be able to travel the world and see outside of Newark, right? And that alone let me want more, let me imagine to be. So I always try to take our young people on trips and stuff like that, so that they can get to see outside of Newark and see outside of their norm. You'll be surprised how many young people, I know you won't be surprised because you do this work, you guys do this work, but you know, you talking about, it's 5 wards in the city of Newark, and some of our young people never been outside of their ward, right? So that's all they know. So if that's all they know, that's all they expect.
Yeah, the smaller your universe, the smaller your dreams.
Absolutely. I like that.
So, what gives you hope when you think about the future of young people in Newark?
Man, at the end of the day, our young people are brilliant, right? They're brilliant. That today they're social media is good and bad, right? But there's a level of understanding that our young people have that we didn't have, right? The education, the information that they have. I just believe that now they have to have them trusted adults to be able to lead them to the promised land instead of off a cliff, right? So, I talk to my staff all the time about, you got to be careful, right? These young people are listening and they're watching and they're smart, right? So they will manipulate you if you let them, right? But at the same time, you can learn so much from them as well, right? So you have to be open, right? God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. That's to listen twice as much as we talk, right? So it's important that we understand when to shut up and when to listen, right? When to speak up, step back. You know, so these young people are brilliant. Like, don't sleep on our young people. Like, but give them the tools that they need to be able to survive in this cruel world that we are in.
I agree 100%. I always say it's my favorite part, the best part of my job is when I get to hang with young people for all
Mm,
those reasons, Al-Tariq. I learn a ton and they're brilliant. They just
mm.
need a little support in um, moving in a
Navigating
positive,
this world.
yeah,
Yeah,
navigating the world and moving in a positive direction sometimes. Yeah.
absolutely. Hmm.
What when you think of like the future of arts education and of this healing centered engagement work in Newark, what do you believe is most important to protect and invest in?
Safe space, right? Like understanding that that creates the safe space, the healing center, all of those things create that space. And if we don't do that, these young people, they start to believe that they can't again. I've seen a change starting to happen, right? Where young people starting to believe, especially in the way Newark is built, right? It's a melting pot. They get to see all of these things. They see the art that happens in Newark, right? The architecture, everything is like, it's like crazy. But if you start taking those things away, and they really start to go back to what our unfortunate older generations, they don't believe what the future could have been, right? And now it's happening in front of our eyes, and our young people have the power to change it and create such a beautiful world if they continue to be able to imagine what can be instead of what can't be.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Al-Tariq, for joining us and just keep doing the work you're doing. It's because of folks like you that there is such promise for the young people in Newark.
Amen. It's for us. We can't do this alone. No man is an island. I thank you guys for all the work that you do, and you've done over the years. And over these 20 years, I've learned that no man is an island. I can't do this by myself. You can't do it by yourself. But collectively, they can see us working together, right? And understand that that's what it's about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Al-Tariq.
Thank you.